You're listening to the Cantina Cast, your home for thought-provoking Star Wars talk. Join Albert and Jonesy in breaking down the latest news, trailers, movies, and of course, your favorite characters from a galaxy far, far away.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Cantina Cast. My name is Albert Padilla, and this is episode 365, A Test of Courage. So we're a few weeks behind this. We had some, pandemics. We had some natural disasters. So again, we're just a couple weeks behind on getting back to this stuff. But the good news is we've hopefully got some things here that maybe some of the other shows you listen to, other things you've seen, haven't picked up on. And it's going to be fun to just kind of speculate on where some of the High Republic stories are going, especially with the mid-grade novels here, the young adult novels. So to help me do all of this is someone searching for something desperately at the moment. But no, that's Jonesy.
I'm trying to recover from your shirt, man. Grogu is doing some trippy things with the green screen there, brother.
Yeah, there's a lot of green in the shirt, and it's just kind of, and what it's doing is it's showing you the back here. So Grogu's now orange.
I love it. It's like a hologram type of thing going on.
He is, yeah. How you doing?
Doing great, man. It's a rainy weekend here in Houston, which I am a huge fan of, actually. So it's
It's better than the humidity that's always in Houston.
Yeah, it's actually been dry, which has been really nice. But yeah, man, I'm excited to get back into some High Republic. And we were talking before we came on the air. I've been reading some of the comics and stuff. So we're going to get some of the news and some things that are going on there. I'm excited to see what's coming up soon.
Yeah. Well, let's segue into it. We've got a couple of things to talk about. And we'll start with this came out earlier this week. I think it was like, Monday? Just like yesterday, as a matter of fact. But yeah, so they announced a number of new titles that are all coming part of what they're calling Phase 1, Wave 2. So we are currently in Phase 1 of the High Republic that extends over the course of next, 3 years or something. There's like 3 phases. And Wave 2 is about to kick off here in June. So we're ramping up Phase 1. I think the comics are probably the last thing and you can see it. If you're following the comics, you can kind of see where those storylines are coming to a close for the most part. And we'll probably segue into the next stuff here as part of Wave 2. But yeah, the ones that, you got our attention, right? Avar Kriss riding the Rancor, sure. We'll take that.
Could you be more in love?
No, I can't. This is all I think about now is her. The Star Wars Insider, that's all cool stuff. But this is the one that's got, I think, everybody talking about, and that's The Rising Storm by Cavan Scott. So the next adult novel that's coming in the series, and looking forward to this one greatly. I know you had a chance to look at the synopsis. I guess they gave the descriptions of all of these for the first time, but this one is scheduled to, is it June 29th alongside Race to Crash Point Mountain, I think, or Tower as well, or same day release. But what did you think about the description on this one?
Well, I mean, it's that last bit again. This is the thing that they kept teasing whenever we were learning about Project. I almost call it Project Lithium,
Luminous.
Yeah, Project Luminous. Yeah, it was this this great fear that was going to really shake the Jedi to their core, and we've been speculating a bit about what that is, and it looks like hopefully Cavan Scott's actually going to deliver on that and give us front and center what it is we can expect that that their true enemy is going to really deploy. But it has taken a little bit of clarity for us, though, because we originally were uncertain, if the Nile were involved with any of that. And this highly suggests that there is something with that, though. And in combination with the Force. So this is going to be an interesting one to see if it pans out. We've not really had a Cavan Scott adult book, really, have we? I mean, did Dooku Jedi Lost really qualify as that on the audio front?
No, I wouldn't, but I mean, that's just, either way, I think it can go. But yeah.
Yeah. So I think we're curious to see how Cavan Scott does with with an adult novel. And usually he's been doing some of the younger stuff, and, but this is going to have, Stellan Gios in it, which we're itching to get more.
Finally. Yeah.
Yeah, I know, right? We love Elzar Mann and Bel Zettifar, and we're going to get some more of them. And, Marchion Ro should be front and center. So next chapter and then what's going on. But yeah, it seems like we're going to get one adult novel per wave, which I don't know how I feel about. I feel maybe a little disappointed by that.
I think I don't know that's a prescription. I mean, that's certainly the trend. And I'm with you. I would feel slighted a little bit because I'm invested in the storyline and the characters now. So I'd like to see more come faster. But Yeah, I think the jury's still out. I would hope, given the number of writers that they have, a number of things that are kind of in parallel and flux, that they would be able to, have a moment in there, at least in one of the phases where we've got 2 coming out. Or I don't think we're going to have, a plethora of books that are all adult, but I think there's a good chance we might have it. Hopefully, we won't have to wait very long in between. That's the part that kills us,
Yeah,
at least me.
It's been 6 months.
Yeah,
call it something like that, 5 or 6 months. So
yeah, by the time it comes out.
Yeah.
And and so just I know you kind of teased it up, but it says, as the Jedi struggle to curb the carnage of the rampaging Nile, they come face to face with their true fear their enemy plans to unleash across the galaxy, the kind of fear that will even the Force cannot shield them from. So again, they're, like you said, they're toying with this idea that, the Force is either in jeopardy or at risk or something. We don't know. It's kind of nebulous right now, but we'll get things a little bit cleared up in just a little bit.
Right. And we have no reference to the Drengir in that description either, which is curious considering how prevalent they are now starting to get in some of the material.
Yep. It's almost like two different evil fronts right now that they're fighting. So we speculate whether or not these are going to come together. Are they going to join forces? It's all fun speculation to be determined there. And if you did pick up the Test of Courage novel, in the back they had I think it was just the first chapter of, or one of the chapters of Race to Crash Point Tower. So this is the next book that's coming out same day. This is the young adult novel, and this is got Ram. So I know they've talked about Ram, Jamaran. We won't get into his character just yet. He's a tinkerer and all that with robots and stuff like that, or androids. But that one looks pretty fun. I mean, it's the fair, which we talked about as being one of the great, great works. Thank you. Yeah. So this fair that she's put together here,
and there's a theme through a lot of this content. If you read through this, the comics and the books, both adult, young adult, all the different strands, it's all focused around the fair.
Right.
So it's all centralizing it. So again, we're going to have this continued connectivity between them where they play off and hand off between one and the other, or they show up kind of at the, at individual times before they go and do their own thing. So this is going to continue this interconnectedness of it all.
Right. They've got kind of these like nexus points, like these events and things, that emergences and all that. And then, so we got some more comics here. I mean, the artwork was really cool. The cover art stuff that they're doing, cover art. And then the last one is the Out of the Shadows, which is Justina Ireland. And that is a young adult novel. And this is about a month later. And so we've got 2 coming out on June 29th. This one's coming out July 22nd. And this is our first look at Silvestri Yarrow.
Yeah.
What do you think about this one? I mean, the description. I mean, we don't know much about it other than this. There's a lot of, there's some names that we're familiar with, Comic Vitus and Reese Silas and those guys. But I'm curious to see how this really goes. I mean, this is kind of a big unknown for me right now because there's not a lot of, outside of what we see here, there hasn't been much about it.
Right. And what I think is interesting is Vernestra Rowe is kind of be back in this one. So we're going to talk about her today, which was in a youth book, 8 to 12-year-old. And now she's getting moved up into the young adult novel as well. So we're going to see these characters move in and out of these different age ranges too. So there's not adult characters and children characters. And you and I think, had a speculation about some of this before that we'll get to on the show tonight. But I'm really interested. We're going to talk about her here in a few minutes, but her character, I had some different expectations for her, and she delivered on some and missed maybe a few others. So I am looking forward to her maybe having a bit more of a young adult story, because she is becoming a young adult, right? And so she's going through those motions. So I'm interested to see what they do with that, because I'm also reading the comics, the High Republic comics, and she's in that one right now too, with the latest issue that came out. And I won't spoil it for everyone because it's relatively new, but so it's after this book that we're going to review tonight, but that's already taken the events there. And so how does this all mix together? So clearly, it's just, your head kind of swims with all the different avenues that they're going sometimes. And it's a little bit, it can be a little bit overwhelming trying to piece together where all of these are. So it's really useful when they update the timeline to keep us, kind of lined up.
Yep. Well, this is, this is it, right? This is our Star Wars right now. I mean, we've got Clone Wars coming up. We're going to get into that here very soon. We've got some stuff scheduled for that, but this is what Star Wars looks like right now. And speaking of what Star Wars looks like, this
This is what it used to look like.
That's what it used to look like, right? So this has been long rumored that this would eventually hit. And speaking directly to the Ewoks cartoon, there was a lot of talk about the Droids cartoon. Detours was another one that was always talked about, whether or not that would make it to Disney. Of course, the Ewok movies. I mean, all this stuff that was, quote, Star Wars that maybe didn't have a good run. And I'm not talking about the Clone Wars because that was phenomenal. That's like the highlight of the so far of the what do you call it? The vintage collection that they call on Disney Plus.
Right.
But this is exciting. Like, I'm actually happy to see this. Now, I went back and watched the Ewoks cartoons, and I just like, you know what? I'm going to do it. Pull the Band-Aid off. I haven't seen this thing in I don't know how many years. I'm just going to sit there and watch it. And it was really hard to get through. As a kid, I enjoyed it. I mean, I loved the heck out of it. I thought it was great, a great cartoon. And you kind of realize, okay, well, maybe this wasn't the greatest. So same thing with Droids. Certainly moments in there, I'm sure, that are going to come up and be like kind of cringy at this time. But yeah, this is great. I mean, I like the fact that they're willing to put this stuff out there. This bodes well for Detours, which I know some people are. If you're not familiar, Detours was a comedy kind of show in the vein of like what was the
the guys who did it are the guys who did Robot Chicken.
Robot Chicken. Yep. Yeah. And so there are some episodes that, unless they've pulled them down, there were a number of episodes you could watch on YouTube. And I mean, it's kind of dated. Some of it's the comedy is a sign of the times, making 90s jokes and or odd jokes.
2012, I think. Is that? I mean, it's hard to believe it's almost 10 years.
Yeah. So some of the references are in there are kind of dated, but anyways, the point of this is they're at least willing to bring, quote, the vintage collection and bring a lot of this stuff back. So have you had a chance to watch? You probably watched the Clone Wars, or at least played around watching some of those. But beyond that,
I did rewatch the Boba Fett cartoon. So those who don't know, the Boba Fett cartoon that they released is what was part of the holiday special back in 1978, right? So if you want to see the first appearance of Boba Fett, you get it here. It actually took a little bit for me to get through it too. It was just not super exciting. The animation is a bit odd, but I'm a huge fan of the Clone Wars Clone Wars, not the Clone Wars,
right?
That they did here. I have not watched it yet. They bundled them into 2 volumes, so it's about 2 hours, 1 hour in each one. If you remember, these were really short in the first true season, maybe the second, and then the other one they did where they're a little bit longer episodes. So these are really good because you get a lot more character development for Grievous. You get some really fun visuals. Mace Windu doing really cool Mace Windu stuff. Yep. You get to see Ilum. You get to see Kyber crystals. You get to see a lot of Asajj and Anakin. So this is worth your while to go watch, because while it's not technically canon, a lot of these things are still really canon adjacent and still fit the narrative without really working any harder to get to it. Like, you don't really have to do it. Some of the Asajj, origin story is a little different now, but I'm rattling on because I really don't want to talk about the Battle for Endor or these other garbage things I remember from my childhood.
We've talked about these on the Basement podcast. So if you guys want to again dig into that, there's always that. It's cool that they gave this the story of the faithful Wookiee. I cannot remember honestly if that was I saw the title screen. It doesn't look like this per se. I think it was like a yellow, but I think they came up with that, didn't they?
Yeah, this is brand new. But they actually, because you could tell it's a more modern everything with that they put over this 70s cartoon, and I was a little surprised they gave it a name.
Oh, and I'm wondering too now if they actually mention that it originated in the holiday special, whether they're acknowledging that. I doubt they are. So I'm sure there's people scratching their head like, where did this come from? But yeah,
I don't think they did. Because the other thing that was interesting on Clone Wars, they didn't reference Genndy Tartakovsky at all.
Oh yeah, that's true. And his name was all over it when it released, and it was a big deal.
Yeah, Samurai Jack and all of that. Mm-hmm. And what's really disappointing about that is that even if you go look in the details, they give him no credit in these descriptions, which I think is kind of crappy, to be honest with you. I think that's that's really disappointing.
A bit of a slight there.
I think so. I mean, I don't know how else you take that.
I don't know. Maybe it was a legal thing, or I don't know. We'll never know.
Or maybe people don't know. They don't know who that is anymore.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Like, when it came out, it was a big deal because Samurai Jack was huge and people loved that show, right? And so that was kind of a natural time. But now, if you threw that name out there, I don't know. Maybe his relevance isn't as pertinent these days.
Go watch Clone Wars. It's amazing.
Yeah, it really is. And then lastly, we've got, why the heck is my screen not showing everything here? So a bit of news that's coming up. So Jonesy and I are really excited about this. So every year here in Austin, they do a charity event on May 4th called May the 4th Be With Y'all. See what they did there? And it's put on by by Silver Lake Creative, which is a charity organization that takes money and donates that to like Ronald McDonald House. And so these have always traditionally been done in person. I've been to a few of these. It's great. I mean, there's lightsaber fights. There's a parade. They have kids stuff at the beginning. They have more adult stuff at the end. They've got auctions, and they've got like costume contests, that sort of thing. So it's just on and on. Celebration of Star Wars on May 4th here in Austin. And because of COVID, they're going to do this online. So Josie and I, Josie, sorry, you're now Josie. Jonesy.
Are the Pussycats around here?
Yeah, they're right. Jonesy and the Pussycats. But yeah, we're going to be a part of this year. And we're still kind of in the final stages of planning, but it's looking like we'll probably be using something like this and helping to kind of MC and co-MC with some of the two primary MCs and kind of be the, I don't know, what would you call us? Like the news team up in the booth there?
Yeah, they equate it to like Good Morning America, which is a really high standard.
I don't know if we're going to live up to that, but okay.
Yeah, we'll be the host that kind of banter, and then we kick things around, I suppose. And I'm going to go out to Austin for this, so you'll actually get to see us, together forever.
Yeah. Well, let's not go that far.
Hand in hand.
You better buy me a drink first, Sailor.
I'll buy you two, son.
But yeah, we'll be there. So they've got, we've got a stage. There's all kinds of skits coming. So, this has never been done, at least as far as this event has been on. But I don't know if anybody can screw it up. It's going to be us. But that's the logo there, which I thought was really great. You can kind of see how they took the wording of "May the Force be with y'all" and worked it into the Mandalorian. Of course, you got Baby Yoda back there as well. So, yeah, but more on this as we get closer. So, yeah, great artwork that they always do with that. So, okay. You
have a link. You have a link for the Austin Fan Force, right?
Yes, I've got a link for this. They've got a Facebook page. Maybe I'll get it to Mike. Yeah. But it's silvercreative.org/MT4BWY. And
they're in like Facebook.com/May the Fourth be with y'all or something like that.
Yep. It is. I should have had all this ready, but I had technical difficulties coming in. I'm going to throw it in the
show notes,
in the chat. Yeah, in the chat for now. If you're following us live, you'll see it in the stream eventually, whatever. But we'll get this in the show notes, and so Mike, take note of that.
Yeah.
So, all right, let's get into our content. And I didn't get a chance to put anything together visually. I wanted to. There were actually some really cool artwork that's scattered into this book, and there's not a lot. I think 3 or 4 pictures or whatever, but it's nice artwork. It's very similar. It's the same style as what you see on the cover of A Test of Courage. But I thought what we could do to kind of get this one started, it's going to be a little different than we did with obviously with the Light of the Jedi. We're not going to break this down chapter by chapter and get into every single fine detail. But I thought it'd be interesting at least to talk about the characters themselves, and then maybe touch on some things, Jonesy, that we felt stood out. Either things that we hadn't seen before, things that caught our attention, stuff that would be kind of fun to speculate, on going forward. And what does this mean? Does it mean anything? All that stuff that we're known to be really bad at and have fun doing.
Maybe you can pull us to the side so people can see the cover or the artwork here on the background on the live stream. Is that possible?
I don't. No, you can't.
Okay.
I can make me larger.
All the wizardry you can do, and we can't even show our background.
We can't show the background.
We've got Emery up there at the top. So
yeah, you can stare at Emery the entire time.
Right, and Vernestra's arm.
All right, so let's start with this. I was going to read the. Actually, I'm going to put you on the spot. Will you read the synopsis, and then I'll kind of wrap it up. We're going to spoil. And again, spoiler alert. I mean, hopefully you've read this novel by now. And if you haven't, my goodness, go read it. It's like you can read it in one night. Yeah, literally.
It's literally like a 2.5 to 3 hour read. Really, it's only 146 pages on my phone.
Okay.
It goes really, really fast.
All right, you want to give the synopsis a shot here, and then I'll fill in the blanks on what happens with all the spoilers right after that.
Right, I don't have to say it like Tom Kane anymore, right?
No, you don't.
Long before the Clone Wars, the Empire or the First Order, the Jedi lit the way for the galaxy in a golden age known as the High Republic. Vernestra Rwoh has just become a Jedi Knight at age 15, but her first real assignment feels an awful light like babysitting. She's been charged with supervising 11-year-old aspiring inventor Avon Starros on a cruiser headed to the dedication of a wondrous new space station called Starlight Beacon. But soon into their journey, bombs go off aboard the cruiser. While the adult Jedi try to save the ship, Vernestra, Avon's droid J6, A Jedi Padawan and an ambassador's son make it to an escape shuttle, but communications are out and supplies are low. They decide to land on a nearby moon, which offers shelter, but not much more. Unbeknownst to them, danger lurks in the forest.
I thought it was odd that it was a question. Does it?
Yeah, that's strange.
I don't know.
But again, this book is for 8 to 12-year-olds, so maybe it's just meant to
stir up drama and excitement, right?
Right. Yeah.
All right. So this does take place right after the destruction of the Legacy run and the great disaster from Light of the Jedi, right? So we've talked about that, and it kind of falls in right in the middle. Well, I wouldn't say technically in the middle, but it definitely happens after the great disaster and before the dedication to the Starlight Beacon, which is at the very end of that, right? And the rest of the story is that also on this moon, and the moon's called Wevo, which is kind of a weird name, but Wevo is the name of the moon. There's also two Nihil that they come across on the moon, and they are there because they were the ones that actually blew up the spaceship that they were all traveling on. And it was called the Steady Wing. And when that ship blew up, they realized there was a potential that people could have survived. And so they were kind of the cleanup crew, right? They were kind of tying up loose ends, trying to make sure that there were no survivors to kind of keep the identity safe of the Nihil and what they were doing. So they are all on this planet. At some point, two of the boys in the story decide to go exact revenge on the two Nihil. One of them is a Jedi, which we're going to talk about here in a little bit and how that didn't go. And they end up getting captured. The girls, so there's one Jedi, there's a technician, like inventor kind of person.
Son of senator, right?
Yeah, right. And then there's a droid. They all go to rescue the boys, and they do. And then there's a big confrontation between the two Jedi, who's one's kind of gotten bitten by the dark side a little bit, well, maybe more than a little bit. And once that gets all cleared up, they're finally rescued by Master Skier, as I have to force myself to say, and Keeve, who's also from the High Republic comic. So they come, they rescue them, they get them off the planet. And the book ends, we'll talk about that too at the very end, with a new character that is introduced from the Nihil, who I'm curious to see like where she fits into all of this later down the road. But how did you like this book? I mean, it's and like we need to set expectations, right? I think people have tried to do that, and I think some people are still just not following or not caring. But how did you like the book, given this is truly a young adult novel and something you can get through, and like you said, in about a 2 to 3 hour read?
I thought it was fairly good. Actually, some of the words and things they used in it were, appropriate. I mean, I'm around some 10-year-olds, 11-year-olds, and I think they would enjoy this type of thing. The story isn't anything overwhelmingly exciting, right? There's a lot of exposition. We're learning new characters, and the conflict at the end and the resolution. It's a very gentle curve. It's not going to be anything that you would expect from an adult novel, and I think that's exactly what we have to really go into it with. And that's probably what people have an issue with. They were like, well, even kids' book can have excitement and things like that. But, kids, you have to give it a bit more of that gentle curve. So, but it was really easy to read. The characters were very well defined, I thought. I would have liked a little more about Vernestra, actually. Vernestra, I thought that she got a little short-ended of what we had originally did some speculation on when we were doing our High Republic introduction show months ago. But overall, a solid book, especially for the age group it is. And I think it does a great job. And like we were talking about earlier, Justina Ireland is now taking Vernestra Rowe and Emery into a young adult book. And so I'm curious now to see how that evolves, and not only from a storytelling perspective, but also, what they're able to and kind of allowed to do with the characters, right? Because, and you brought this up a few shows ago, that, the young adult character or the young adult books are playing with some rather adult themes, or they're referencing it, right? And so, how do they take the characters and how do they evolve in a different way, in a more mature way? But overall, really liked Avon Stars a lot. I thought she was probably the star of this book. Her just overwhelming curiosity about everything and just willingness to get into trouble. Was just a highlight for me on this one. What about you?
Yeah, same. I would agree. I mean, it's a pretty solid story. Now, it doesn't have the complexity of Light of the Jedi, right? You're not having to deal with like multiple fronts and storylines and threads and kind of wondering how things are going to kind of come together and what's the relevance of it all, which is all fun to do in the long novels, right? That's kind of why you go into those. You want to kind of figure out how it's going to, or at least just see how it all comes together. This one is very straightforward, right? It is a there's again not a lot of depth to it, but there's not supposed to be either, right? I mean, this is not a novel for you and I to read, or I mean, we did and we can enjoy it, but it wasn't. We're not the target audience, right? So from that perspective, I thought it was a great novel. Like the characters are great. They've got depth. They've got dimension to them. There's a lot to be explored, and they do explore some things, but they leave a lot of things open. And the book ends with a lot of things that are still wide open. So I enjoyed a lot of that. I love the fact that it was just a quick read, and there were, believe it or not, like of course, we can take a 2-minute trailer and turn that into a 2-hour episode, but I think there was enough here for us to kind of extrapolate and talk about, and that I felt was like of substance that we could talk about that may or may not play into future storylines and threads and ideas in the High Republic era. But I think there are. I mean, I think everything seems very purposeful, and so even the smallest things that you just kind of maybe skim over or don't pay too much attention to, I think will have either repercussions down the road or, expand into something a little bit more concrete or substantial, which would be really exciting because I think there are some great stuff in there from that perspective.
Yeah, and some of these characters are interesting enough, even in a book like this, that you actually want some of that, which I think is really important. Even if you feel like they were a little flat or they didn't have the complexity, like you were saying, there's still enough there that you want to learn more about them, especially if you see them pop up in other medium.
Yep. And there was one part of me too that was wondering, like, if this was, and I think it got kind of answered to some extent, but whether or not we would see this host of characters as, quote, the young adult, mid-grade level characters, and would we ever get like an Honesty or an Emery in something like Light of the Jedi, right? I don't know that they'll ever get to that. Maybe by phase 3, that would be cool to kind of see them progress as they get older and some of the other ones start, unfortunately, dying off or something happens to them. Being able to kind of see them progress into that role. And so when we end with the High Republic, wouldn't that be crazy if these were like some of the main characters, right? Of the series or of the storyline.
I really like that idea too. I like them coming back together, even if they get pulled apart. And like I said earlier, we've already got Emery and Vernestra in the High Republic comic book. And presumably we're going to see some of these other characters come in and out of High Republic Adventures as well as the flagship comic. So, I think it would be good. I think it would be good to have a generation grow up with certain characters and be able to enjoy them and see that growth and experience that journey with them, like we did, with Luke back when we were kids.
Right.
That journey as you go through it, and I think these characters have got some great potential to be able to deliver on some of that.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the characters first, and we'll start with Vanessa Rowe. Vern, as Justina likes to call her, and she's called in the novel. And I got if it was this novel or not, but I know she's not really, I guess, fond of that name. Right. The character is probably not the fondest of that name, but I think it's hilarious. But yeah, so just quickly on her, she's a Miralon, so she's got the little diamond tattoo stuff on her face or whatever.
Like Luminara,
yeah. She's only 16 years old. She is the former Padawan of Stellan Gios, and she became a Jedi Knight at age 15, which was significant. And I know we already spent some time speculating on how that was, but man, that really, you put it in perspective of like even during the original the prequel trilogy.
Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty aggressive. So there's got to be a lot there. And in this role, in this novel, she does come across more as an adult than a kid, even though she is only 16. So she's a lot older, a lot wiser than her age may dictate, which we would expect, especially since this can be a story that's very easy to put into the adventures and babysitting category, right?
Right.
And it really didn't, because she was doing a lot more than just babysitting. She was doing a lot of coaching. She was doing a lot of, mental kind of, a lot of therapy with the characters and helping them out in a lot of different ways, helping them grow, if you will. But she seemed very level-headed, very mature for her age. There weren't a lot of moments where she was just a kid or acted like a 16-year-old kid. So I think all of that makes sense. And the fact that she's a prodigy and she's got, I think she's very strong in her force ability. She was able to demonstrate that earlier on when the ship was exploding, and, her ability to kind of keep everything together literally with the force was pretty cool. And then there was a part of her that's got some ingenuity, which we'll get into in a little bit with her weapon. But I've said enough about her. What about you? What did I not cover? What did you like about her?
Yeah, I agree. When we first introduced to her, we get a little impatience, but she's, still fairly well put together. And Master Douglas is there on the ship with them. And when things start going haywire and start going wrong, the amount of faith that they have in one another and his faith placed in her as a Jedi Knight. And you start to see this change already in her, that she's got to assume more of this leadership role. And she has that moment of clarity later on that this is what she is supposed to be. This is what she's going to do. And she has to do. She's responsible now for this merry band of kids, really. But it's really interesting. We didn't get, here she is trying to keep the door closed. Or I guess everything put together. But it's interesting how she seemed almost too mature in some ways, right? For a 15, 16-year-old, you don't really expect them to be that mature, that able to handle the loss of Master Douglas. And they all felt this in a lot of ways. And we'll talk about Emery and honesty here in particular soon. But for her to be able to do that, and like you said, really a counselor a lot of the time, and trying to coach him down off the ledge, Emery in particular, I think it was really a sign of her maturity that I wasn't really expecting. And I think that's probably why when I spoke earlier about her character arc feeling maybe a little bit flat compared to where we thought maybe she would be or what we would see, is we kind of expected to see it more of a, ramping up type of thing. And there was a moment, whereas really she had to step into it almost immediately, and which worked for the story. And it when you look at it from an 8 to 12-year-old type of perspective, that makes a lot of sense, right? And keep some of that going. But overall, I still like the character a lot, and she has a lot of potential. I mean, a lot of potential of what she can do. And like you were referencing with her lightsaber, is just something that was made an interesting kind of conflict point at one point, as well as just why did she get this vision to do it, and what purpose does it serve aside from hack and slash when you're going through the jungle?
Yeah. Well, let's we'll come back to that, because I kind of want to lump all of the new Force abilities and maybe not new, but the Force abilities at least were on display, although some were new. Right. And particularly her weapon a little bit later, and kind of talk about, here's what you can expect from the High Republic from that angle.
Right.
There, the other thing about her that I felt was intriguing was she's I don't know where they're going to take her with this story, and where she leaves off at the very end. Like the fact that she's taken on a Padawan, and we should probably mention all that, right? I mean, first off, she was sent to watch Avon Starros. She's almost kind of like this. I don't know. I wouldn't call her bodyguard, but certainly somebody that was supposed to keep her in line, because she was much more mature. And you got a character like Avon, who's just, wow, we're going to get into that in just a little bit.
Finding trouble where it doesn't even exist.
She's a handful, my goodness. But yeah, I mean, and it makes sense that somebody like a Vern would be, put together with her. But that's your first mission, right? You become a Jedi Knight, and the first thing you're going to go do is babysit some kid that's like just 2 years younger than you, which says a lot in itself. But then at the very end, she's taken on a Padawan. So not only is she's only 16 years old and already taken on a Padawan at the request of, somebody who sits on the council in Skier. So yeah, I mean, like to your point, she's really mature for her age, probably more than we're led to believe or even can believe. But they are really throwing a lot of responsibility on her. And I just wonder if they're going to burn her out. Like if she's going to have some kind of burnout a little bit later. Because if you got, kids got to develop, right? You can be great. You can be responsible, mature and all that stuff. But what are you sacrificing for all that? Now, the Jedi sacrifice so much already by taking kids and putting them through this, program and removing them from their families and all of that. But I just wonder if that's going to catch up with her at some point and what that would look like if it does.
Well, I got a feel for that from Master Douglas too. I mean, they have a rock star in their midst, and he made a big deal about it. This is the one who's, ushering in a whole new generation of Jedi, and is the cream of the crop of what we have to offer, and an example of. I mean, that's a lot of pressure. I mean, a whole lot of pressure for someone in their middle teenage years to do all of this, especially with the ability she has. I can imagine that. I mean, she wouldn't be a knight if she hadn't mastered some of that, clearly. But I'm with you. For her to take on a Padawan, especially where they were at the end of this book, and to take on Emery, and then her age and experience, she's only been knighted for maybe a year. Mm-hmm. Be generous and give her a year. It just doesn't that seem too soon for someone to have that kind of responsibility? I mean, I don't know how long you're a knight for before you become a master, but knights are usually still have a master. I mean, Anakin was still with Obi-Wan, right? I know they maybe likely weren't master apprentice as closely anymore and from a more natural sense, but they were still very much paired up, and I'm unclear why she's now just kind of off on her own, and now she's got her own Padawan. That's a lot, really, so early. And I'm with you, it just seems like a recipe for something to go wrong, especially with what happened.
And we'll get into this because I mean, it's not like she got a Padawan who is just the joy of everyone's eye right now either. I mean, she's arguably got the worst of the worst in terms of Padawans, or maybe not. I don't know. We'll talk about that here.
Situations, I think. Yeah. Yes. At the very least. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he's a good person and all that. He made some bad choices, and unfortunately, we know where this usually leads, but maybe not. Maybe it's different in the High Republic. So. Right. Okay, so we'll come back to her in a little bit because we want to talk about her, some of the powers that she displayed and her weapon. But let's get into Avon Starros. And so she's a human. She's 12 years old. She's an aspiring inventor. She's very strong-willed, very opinionated, very rebellious. She's got a very inquisitive mind. She's kind of the, take action, ask, for forgiveness later, right?
Right.
The Mike Rondo school of thinking. She borrows things at times. I think when it starts, the book opens up with her borrowing a speeder bike or a swoop or something, and she's driving around on that thing. And then later on, we see her borrow something else, which we'll talk about. Her mother is a Republican senator, and there's a great moment in there which I don't even have in the show notes. We're not going to get into it, where there's this realization for a lot of these kids that their parents really do care, and they may not see it. And I think as kids, we all kind of go through that, which kudos to Justina Ireland for putting that in there. And it's so under the radar that I don't think it's really going to, people are going to latch onto it. But she does go through that as well.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I agree with you. I think that was actually one of the more touching, like, emotional aspects of the book.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought it was really cool to see her have that realization again at 12 years old and all the brilliance in the world. But she has a lot of anger against her mother. She feels like she's been cast aside and she's been forgotten. She hasn't been contacted in over a month. Things like that. And, why would she do all these things if she just didn't want to get away from her and find an excuse? And, things happen later on and you're able to have a different perspective on it. And I thought Justina Ireland really did a really nice job of having that realization moment, not lingering on it too long, but just enough that it did really give you a little bit of that emotional weight and gravity that I think the book had plenty of, I thought. But I think this one for Avon Starros, who was having a difficult time really having any empathy for a lot of things, this was the moment where we started to see her really understand more and her start to mature and her character arc. And this one I thought was quite solid.
Yeah. I mean, that's to your point. That's going to be pretty exciting when we see her a little bit later.
Yeah.
There's and then lastly, she is a descendant of Santa Starros, who, if you followed the Star Wars comic, that's Han Solo's wife. Wife in quotes. Yeah. So the quick story is they were posing as husband and wife, and I think they went through and did the deed for the sake of the heist or the whatever. I can't remember what they were. It was something, scoundrelly, if that's a word.
Right.
And so technically she's, the wife of Han Solo, but it wasn't like a consummated marriage or anything. But yeah, she is of that bloodline further down. So how that plays into it, I mean, that's obviously a very conscious decision, and curious to see why, because she could have been anybody, but they chose to make her a part of that bloodline. So we'll see if why or how that kind of plays out, or what that would mean for some of them. Maybe they're the characters and the stories that they're still coming, because I think she's still active in the Star Wars comic.
Yeah,
she's still around anyways.
Yeah, she came back around just recently, I believe. Yeah, and again, they're both very strong-willed, younger girl and woman, and very rebellious, and you can definitely see a lot of that that blood has remained in the bloodline.
Yep. There's and then we'll talk about J6, who, let me go over here. I can probably blow this up a little bit so you can kind of see the characters. But J6 is the android there, who looks kind of like a 3PO, kind of like there's a character named Scorpio. If you played, well, you probably haven't, but SWTOR, there's a character named Scorpio who looks very similar. But this is she used to be a bodyguard. Now she's kind of like a nanny droid. So her mom has her running around with this droid. She's armed and has a lot of weapons because she used to be a bodyguard droid or whatever, which I thought was kind of cool. She pulls all these weapons out at the very end of the book and just startles everybody. Like, what in the heck? I didn't know this. She's got like an arsenal in all her, pockets, if you will. But the cool thing about this, and just a bit of speculation, I did like the fact that her personality is atypical in this timeline. Somebody, a droid that is of this consciousness, this sentience, right, is not, it's just not common. And it's so far that she is making decisions about her own self. Like, she's very self-aware. And all this is like startling to everybody that sees, or more so for Avon, because Avon turns out is the one that programmed her. She did this programming to allow her to kind of be more realistic and more lifelike. And I'm wondering now if this is going to be, then I'm going to really get into speculation here, but I started thinking, that'd be cool if these are the origins of, like, a chopper or a K2SO or a C3PO, right? These droids that we know from our original Star Wars, after the High Republic, that had very large personalities. And whether this was like the beginning of it, and I started thinking, well, how about R2? What if this is like, who creates R2, who gives them the programming? Maybe we're going to get an origin that somehow ties back to maybe not her directly, which I think would be actually cool. I wouldn't mind seeing R2's origins and saying, no, this is where it started, and it was a droid that she picked up and did some experimental stuff with. That'd be kind of cool. But yeah, it feels like this is kind of setting the stage for that lineage or that line of, conscious droids or self-awareness, that level of self-awareness that we see in some of the androids in our the Star Wars that comes after this.
Let me give you another one though. So what about L3? So L3 is an older model.
Mm-hmm.
She's got the premier navigation all in her head, right? Or in her whatever Lando.
I know where you're going. I see where you're going with this. Yeah.
Yeah. So you have a highly opinionated, very self-aware, very human droid, more than anything that we've ever seen. I think even KTSO was very natural with things, but still had a very much a programmatic type of way approach to things. Whereas L3 was just, she was self-conscious. Yeah. Right. And that type of thing. And so there's it's interesting if we'll get something like that that's touched on, or at least alluded to, because with the hyperspace lanes and everything else that they've already brought towards us, there is a connection there. And again, we'll probably make more than what is actually exists. But
yeah,
I like that idea of somehow L3 is born of some sorts in this era. Would be kind of neat.
Yeah, and this is, that's the blueprints right there, right? You can kind of see it. So we'll see. Again, pure speculation on our part. Let's talk about Emery Cantos. And I don't have the other one. I'm just going to pull up the other image so that you guys can see that one. But Emery is the Jedi that we can see here. Let me get off of this. And you can kind of see him up here.
Yeah.
Super tall. He's kind of lanky, whatever. He's 14 years old. He's a human. His Padawan was Master Douglas Sunvale, who died in when that ship went down. All these kids survived, and as far as we know, the kids are the only ones to have survived.
Yeah.
Everyone else died on that ship, including his Jedi master. So, and the big kind of key point for him is, again, he's kind of like a what's his name from Wreath, like Silas, or he's kind of like Wreath Silas, where he's not the best Jedi, right? He has trouble. He's not like, he's not the Vern or the Avar Chris or any of these other great Jedi, but he's got a master that really believes in him, and he seems to flourish when his master is around. So he's very connected emotionally, and relies on that Jedi master to be there to kind of give him the inner strength and the courage and everything he needs to be a successful Jedi. And when that's literally taken from him and destroyed because he dies, it sends him down a downward spiral. And it kind of gives us the conflict. It's got probably the biggest dynamic is his personality and how he's kind of dealing with all of this, being kind of ripped out. You got to think he's already been ripped out from one parent. Now he's going to what he considers to be his parent. And that was part of that storyline we were talking about, right? He's kind of, they're making these parallels between, parenthood, children and parents versus Jedi masters and Padawans. And at least in this era, they're almost indistinguishable. Like, you can't separate the two, right? Because, and there's a lot to it. And I know I'm going on here, but we're going to get into feelings, right? And I think that we're going to really get into feelings, guys. No, but seriously, like the aspect of feelings and how much in this era it's encouraged to be really in tune with your feelings. And it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to, feel bad and do all that stuff. You just can't give into it. And that's a little different than I think from the perspective that we get going into the prequel trilogy and obviously thereafter, where they're very stoic and they know they can't allow that stuff to happen. And is it because of stuff that happens in the High Republic? Because, are we seeing why that the mentality or, the doctrine or whatever of the Jedi in the prequel trilogy and the original trilogy is the way it is because of how in tune everybody's are with their feelings here. But this is a good example. This character, right, he took it to heart when that happened. But so what else on him?
Yeah. I mean, more on the relationship aspect of it. I mean, it's like borderline codependent.
Yeah.
I mean, it's probably not borderline. He's vastly. It's a strict definition of codependency in this one, and it started lending me like some thoughts and questions about. This isn't the first time we've seen this type of connection between a Padawan and the Master, or even a Knight and a Master, and so I'm really curious if Jedi in this era are really somewhat coddled when they're young. And I think, and that's kind of speaking to your point you were just talking about, is that they have got such a connection here. And we have seen where the younger Jedi are failing, right? Because we saw this with Bell jumping off a cliff. We've seen it in the Keeve jumping off with Master Skier on a cliff in the comic books, and so we've seen these things where and then of course Emery here unable to get his lightsaber to work, and properly at the very least. It's weak. It kind of fades in and out a little bit.
Yeah.
It's not proper. It can hack at bushes and stuff, but it really can't repel blasters. It can't really be in a lightsaber fight, and it's inconsistent, right? And it's just one of these things. I'm just curious if they're so nice, and they have so much, and some of the masters are definitely pushing their Padawans, but I'm beginning to wonder if they're a bit soft, to be honest with you. There hasn't been a lot of conflict in a long time, it seems like, in this era, right?
Yeah.
And now we're having, I mean, it's almost like the prequel trilogy where you're really prepared for what's coming to you? And the answer honestly seems like no, we're not. And the youth of this era, there's a question, for me, there's a huge question mark around how many of them are actually ready for this kind of conflict that's coming with the Drengir and with the Nile. I mean, hell, now we've even got the Hutts involved in the comic book.
Oh,
so,
yeah.
So, I mean, I don't know. You got all these different things at play now, and it's like the Clone Wars. They're going to have to come up to speed really, really fast in order to do this. And you're going to have kids like Emery who are going to be tested really hard. And even some of the masters, and we've seen some of the masters, flirting with some things that make you question about what where they're headed in the future as well.
Yep. So, and then the last character is it's this guy right here. It looks like he's kind of in a bathrobe. So that's Honesty Weft, and again, he's another character that there's a lot going on here because he ends up losing his parents. So the whole storyline is, or one of the sub storylines here, is that they're part of the Dalnan. Is it Dalnans?
Yep.
So yeah, so the Dalnans they're trying to get the Dalnans into the Republic, be a part of the Republic, and these guys live out in the outer regions out here where the Starlight Beacon is and all that, right? And so what the whole plan is Avon's mom wanted her to go befriend the Dalnans so that she could get some inside there, get a relationship going, kind of help ease to get them in to be part of the Republic. And so he's on on this ship with his parents, and they're all heading to the Starlight Beacon because they want to be there in time for the dedication.
His mother, I think, is still back.
Yep. Thank you.
Yeah. And there's a delegation of Dalnans as well. So a lot of their high council, if you will, are on the ship.
If this is a counselor ship, where's the ambassador? No, I'm kidding. So yeah. So anyway, when he gets separated from his dad dies as well. And so again, he's reeling as well. So you've got two boys that have just lost their parents, their father figures. Mm-hmm. And this puts them in a position, which I mentioned earlier. They take it upon themselves to go seek revenge out on the Nile after they determine that they're the ones that caused the whole ship to go down. But in the same regard, I mean, he's only 14 years old. He's got this weird dynamic where he's an aspiring combat medic, but yet he comes from a planet that maybe not like Alderaan, but they're not really a combative type planet, right? It's like it's probably the farthest thing he should be trying to become. But
they breed warriors. They're preparing for the war that has never there,
happened.
basically, in generation or two.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so he's kind of going on this. That's what he wants to do. And then there's this whole aspect of him where he's kind of going on this. I don't know what we call like a vocational training or something. You know, where they send them off to go do a special mission, and when they come back, they have the skills that they need in order to kind of fulfill the role that they want to go into. So that was his background. Again, there's a lot there, and you know whether or not that anything comes of it, we don't know yet. But the key takeaway is, you know, again, like with Emery, he is going through a lot of things and trying to deal with the grief that he's experiencing. And he's got no parents there, nobody to confide in outside of, you know, Vanessa Rowe, we've already talked about as being, you know, pretty young herself. So yeah, he befriends Emery. Is like, yeah, man, let's go get revenge on these guys. Let's go kill them. Let's do this. And they feed off of each other. That was a really cool thing. Like Emery, towards the very end of the book, when, you know, after he went down the dark side path, and, you know, he knows he's not going to be expelled from the Jedi Order and all of that stuff. You know, he confesses that, you know, I actually fed off of his and then empowered him as well to do these things. Like, you know, he really acknowledges that this was not a good combination to have two people that had a lot of emotions tied into their losses, and rightfully so. But yeah, it led them both to do some really some dark things.
Yeah, and you start to see all the things that we've learned over the generations of Star Wars, right? Of, you know, fear, despair, loss, all those things, because like one bad thing happened after another to these kids. So the ship, traumatic event with the ship blowing up, they lose their parental figures. They get on a ship that is hardly functioning, is only by luck this thing is actually working. It doesn't have any supplies. It can't get anywhere. So they go to a remote planet, or a moon rather. And then the moon, doesn't seem to be any civilization around them. And then it has acid rain. And then
Right.
I mean, it's just like one thing after another, you know, and even the kid's pet monkey dies. I mean, get killed. So, I mean, it's just like, you can see why, like how you can just get completely just pressed down and completely smothered with just hopelessness. Right. And honesty in particular is just negative about everything. He has these glimmers of, in these moments of like, I'm going to take charge. I'm going to put my training to use. I actually have something to contribute. But then he's in his own way with just everything he's experienced, everything that he's feeling, and unable to really talk with anybody around him. And one thing, the characters all try to help each other in various ways throughout the book, which I thought was interesting, because you could always see which ones kind of worked and which ones didn't. And I thought that was just, it was kind of a bit of a fun read to see how they all tried, especially Avon, who really doesn't have kind of any empathy at all for much.
No filter. Yeah. Whatever's on their mind. Yeah.
Yeah. It just kind of comes out. But you're right. Emery's empathy, and he's a bit of an empath. So he was able to help find the moon, because his one of his force abilities, and he didn't realize it was this strong, is to be able to kind of point a wayfinder type of thing. I believe you called it. You know, of being able to somewhat sense a direction where people are at, or emotion and that type of thing. He gets these, and so he was able to help them steer the ship in a direction of where they were going. But that's exactly the same type of thing that happened with honesty at the same time. You know, they're brooding off of one another, and then when they actually find the Nihiler there, and they learn that these are the guys that, you know, that did all of this and took everything away from them, you know, they rile each other up, and then Emery just finishes the job of riling them up, and just like he stands over him like, "You're not asleep. Well, let's go."
Yeah,
you know,
right.
You want this, right? We can go do this. They're not going to let us do it, so we're going to go take care of ourselves. We're men.
Yeah.
Ish.
Yeah. And Steph brought up a good point about that too. There was a moment in there where they were like, all right, the boys screwed up. The girls got together, and let's go get them. Let's go get them out of there.
Right. As usual, bailing the boys out.
That's fine. I'll accept that. That's fair criticism. I want to show, let's see, let me throw this up too. So I did get there are two other characters. You can kind of see them here. There's Clyneth Daw, who is the girl, there with the pink hair. They're mentioned earlier on in the novel. Like I said, they're the ones that actually end up, seeing the bombs that go off. I'm trying to blow that up a little bit more now. You can see
there's all the guns for J6.
Yeah, right. She's got like an arsenal there. But that's her. And the Aqualish is somebody named, is it Guishi or Guish? I forget now. Guishi, something like that.
Something like that.
I mean, they play a minor role. I mean, they're in there, but they don't really get into their heads or anything like that. They're just there to be the bad guys, which is good. Again, we're not. These are cronies,
basically.
Yes, lackeys.
Yeah, the people that they go off and they plan the charges everywhere, and if they get sucked up in it, then no big deal. But there is some fear. They want to be promoted within the within the ranks of the Nile, and they sound like they're new Nile as well, and they're all part of Kazov's strike area or his Tempest, which I thought was interesting.
Yep, that guy. More of his. We've seen a lot of his guys so far. Or people. How about that? Okay, so with the rest of the time that we got on the show, I thought let's just get into like some of the things that stood out for you. And there may not be any kind of sequential order here in terms of when these things occurred, but these are the things that really stood out to us in the novel that we felt like were substantial, and we should probably talk about whether they meant something relative to what was going on in the story at the time, or potentially have some maybe they lead to something a little bit later. So give me, I guess, what's your first one? What do you want to get into?
Well, I think we finally started flirting with the darkness, which I thought was fun. And we talked a little bit about this already, but we even got a little bit of history too. We got confirmation that the ancient Jedi started the Sith, right? At least that's from their perspective. We got a Night Sisters and a Guardians of Yavin, which we don't really know what that is. But what I thought was interesting about it was that they value the quote chaotic, destructive side of the Force, and so this is very different. This is like MCU. Like so, with Marvel, you have like Wanda, right? Wanda Maximoff is the Scarlet Witch, but she's actually using chaos magic rather than some of the other magics that are out there. And there's some great tutorials on YouTube explaining all that because I cannot do it. But this is a variation of that. It feels like you've got the Force, you've got the light side and the dark side, and then you got these chaotic people in between that can wield it in these magical, mystical type of ways. So I liked that they brought that into it. But other things that they brought in here were, the Force is naturally bent towards justice while in balance, which I thought was very interesting. And again, that's a very Jedi perspective. And then Skier also at the very end of it, he says it's a deliberate path to the dark. It's not a series of bad days. You actually make the decision over and over and over to do those things. And we definitely saw Imri doing that. And we had that inner monologue too, that he knew it was wrong. He knew he shouldn't be, taunting Bernestra. And then he was able to, basically tell himself that, he could take care of her and he would, and it's the right thing to do. And I mean, he was made a very conscious choice to go through that one. Of course, she put him in his place quite quickly and showed him really what she's capable of. But I just thought it was interesting. We finally got some characters really dealing with the dark side, and that darkness coming up. And it's interesting to see how they all interpret and manage some of that and what they know about it and what they know about the history of it. And so I was really happy that it finally showed up somewhere. And we really got an idea for it. We're getting a little bit in the comics. We're going to get it elsewhere, right? This is all coming up. But it was really interesting that it was in such a children's type of book for our first real exploration of the dark side in the High Republic, though.
Yeah, so a couple things there, like the Force naturally bent toward justice while in balance. That was like I read that line, I thought, okay, but whose perspective is that from? Is that
exactly
from their point of view or not, or is that really it? I mean, should we expect that to be the case? I mean, I think that changes things, substantially if that's true. But I think I read that more as from their perspective.
And it seemed like a very naive perspective as well.
Yes, I would agree.
That's the one thing I took away from it is like, no, this is the way it is. My 14-year-old brain mind is black and white, and this is justice, is the light. And again, lack of conflict, I think, and lack of real exposure to what the darkness really is.
Yeah, and so the other thing, in just to kind of touch on what you said there with the Skier's, deliberate path to the dark, not a series of bad days. That is I think that is substantial. You think about like Yoda's quote, right, which seems so definitive that once you start down the path of the dark side, forever will dominate your destiny, right? When we heard that line in Empire Strikes Back, I mean, that was significant. It's like, okay, well, you can't ever do this. Like it's off. And maybe Yoda's right. I don't know what things are going to be like in this era. Maybe a lot of the wisdom that we see him sharing with Luke and whoever is listening is coming and stemming because of the events that happened in the High Republic era. Because he seems so very too old to train, right? What if there's a character that we're going to find out that came in around the same time as Anakin and did some really awful things, or a series of them or something, right? And that led him to kind of have that mindset, or the mindset of, it is black and white as much as
spoiler alert. There is one in the High Republic Adventures.
Yeah, that's true. There is one High Republic Adventures. Although, well, okay, we won't get to that. But so maybe that's one, or maybe it is a character that it seems like here it's really about what we kind of we try to teach our kids today. It's like, hey, you're not a bad person. You've just made bad decisions, right? And
Right.
That's not going to mean that you're forever locked into this role of being a bad person all your life. I mean, this is, you apologize, you make up for it and say you're sorry and get on with it. Don't do it again. Don't make the mistake again. I don't know that works so well in the Force. But they
Right.
seem to, at least the Jedi seem to think that's the case here, right? You can be tempted, and it's okay to be tempted. It's okay to be in touch with your feelings, and it's okay to feel everything that you're feeling, which again is very, to me at least, it feels very counterintuitive to what the Jedi are being taught and go through in all the Lucas era, right, if you will.
Right.
Very different there. So who knows? We'll see how this kind of plays out. But I thought it was interesting that not only did he cross into the dark side, so Emery, not only did he cross in the dark side, because at one point he's choking one of the Nile, right? He's using the dark side to clearly choke her. So it's a force choke. And I think we've always associated force choking with a certain level of dark side power, right? Vader can do it, but it's not just something every dark side user is doing, at least not in, well, yeah. But yeah, so anyways, I have a feeling like he did really tap into a very potent level of dark side power to get to where he was, because not only did he do that, like you said, he then went on and was like, well, I can't really do this. She's a Jedi. And he's like, you know what? Forget it. I can take her. And his lightsaber was suddenly, you mentioned earlier, it was very purposeful that they talked about his lightsaber not being very bright and not being very strong. And then when he gets into this battle, because he's tapped into the dark side, it's like super glowing bright, right? It's super strong. He's realizing the potential and how much tapping in the dark side is making him a more powerful force user, that he feels emboldened to take on somebody like Vanessa Rowe, who's arguably one of the best, if not the best, that's out there, next to somebody like Avar Chris, my girl. But yeah, so I mean, to that point, there's with like Emery and her, these younger characters that are kind of going through all of this right now. It's just a very, very different era, and it seems like they are allowed to really kind of feel all of this stuff. They just can't hold on to it, and I think that extends into what we've talked about already, being relationships as well. Whether it's a Padawan and a master, whether they are in tune with their feelings, and they're really much closer than we see them in other eras, or in the event of like Avar Chris and Elzar Mann, where they're very much in touch with their personal feelings for one another, on a more than just a platonic or
Right.
friendship level, and they seem to be okay with that. They know they can't cross the line, but they don't fight it, right? They're okay giving into it and acknowledging it. They're just not going to maybe follow through on it. So this is, again, I think this is kind of a recipe for disaster. Personally, I think this is what they're maybe toying with here, and eventually we'll see all that kind of come to fruition and things go horribly wrong because of this, and maybe that changes the mentality a little bit later. But definitely all good points there.
Right. I mean, and I can't remember who said it, but one of the masters said, every Jedi is going to be tempted by the dark at some point. It's just a matter of fact. Something's going to come up, and we've been speculating maybe a bit more about Elzar Mann because it feels a little slighted and stuff like that too.
Yeah,
but
right.
Emery, when he touched into it, he knew what was happening, and just when you get that taste of it, and you get that he started to feel what else he could do, what he was capable of, and you could just understand why it's so alluring and why you could think that that's sustainable and that that's something that you can actually be. But at what cost does it take on you and everything around you? But yeah, these kids, and that was another point I was going to make, is just the whole relationship thing. We talked about quite a bit about it earlier, so I won't rehash most of that. But yeah, is this relationship dynamics and how healthy are the Jedi master Padawan, student relationships? And again, you pointed out just perfectly about there's relationships within the Jedi Order and things like that. So how is that? What are all of these things that we're seeing that you're starting to really? I mean, I thought might be there would have been like some little flirting or something in this book at one point, but it never happened, which I think is appropriate given the age group. But it was still just there's these things that you just don't understand. They're just too. Yeah, they're often a bit too casual about some things, and it certainly seems like we are setting some things up here that we are going to, I'm with you. I think we're going to see why the Jedi Order has more strict rules that we've applied to it, in later generations of Star Wars.
Yeah, and there was a point, and I'm going to draw a blank, so if anybody knows, feel free to chime in, or you can curse me out later. But there was one of the characters, it was either Emery or Honesty, but there was a moment they made a comment about they felt, I think it was Emery that said they felt something more for Avon. And it was just, and that was all the comment was, like he could feel something more was there for her, but didn't acknowledge her, didn't dive into it. I took that as, oh, he's got feelings for her, and it never played out in this book. But maybe again, that was something they're setting up for later on. Now, the repercussions that are in both, whether it's Honesty or an Emery, because now I can't remember. If it's Emery, then we've got a problem because there's a Jedi that's involved, right? But if it's Honesty, that is probably more of a political issue, or maybe there's some political things that are going to happen because where Avon's mom is, and what kind of a position she holds, and now she's getting together with somebody who's may or may not be joining the Republic, or may not want to join the Republic, and does that cause a feud of some sort, family feud, or Romeo and Juliet? I don't know. That's probably more than it's going to go into, but certainly there's going to be a dynamic of that. In either case, there'll be something there, some conflict there, I think.
Right, and we may have missed the whole point. So why did the Nile blow up the ship? It was because of this delegation, because the Downans are too close to the Republic is starting to get too close to the Nile space.
Right.
And this is getting very, very close, and they find that very threatening. So they want to keep that distance as much as possible. So this is kind of we talked about Marchion Row and the strategy of, kind of hit them and then leave and do the damage and cripple them. And you can't destroy them necessarily, but you are definitely going to cripple them and bring down the unity and bring down the alliance and prevent alliances. So this is this plan that's already in motion, before the events of Light of the Jedi.
Yeah. I got a couple things here. I think we've talked about a lot of mine already, and just kind of in the organic nature of this conversation. But I did want to focus on some of the new force powers and abilities, and we don't need to dig into these to any great extent. But this is the stuff that I look forward to, because I always want to see, what have we not seen before? What are some new aspects of things that we haven't seen before? And then, again, why do we not? Why is it that we don't see those things? So Vern was able to display a number of things. There was the whole breach at one point. So when the Steadfast, that's the name? Yep. When one of the bombs blew off, there was a big hole in, it was sucking things out. And there was I think a chair that was blocking the shields to seal. And there was a moment there where she, along with Master Douglas, thank you. It's like $25,000 pyramid. But like Master Douglas and her were trying to keep everybody from getting sucked out of space. And she was doing a pretty good job. I mean, he was probably she ends up letting him kind of do it, but being able to keep everybody in a stasis kind of position, I thought was kind of neat. It reminds me of like in Rise of Skywalker, where the Millennium Falcon blasts everybody and Kylo Ren's just kind of standing there. We know he's using the Force to prevent himself from flying back, all the other putzes that are flying back there. But it was the same kind of thing here, right? They were able to keep everybody in a state of not moving. Let's talk about the whip. And I got a picture here. It's not a very serious picture because this is a kid's book. But this is the light whip. And so we didn't even mention that she's got a purple lightsaber, which we probably should, because I still think there is some significance of it. So far, everybody, with the exception of,
it's not up on screen yet.
Oh, it's not on screen. Sorry. Let me pull that. I think with the exception of 2 characters so far, they seem pretty traditional blue and green lightsabers, right?
Yeah.
But, we've got one character who's got purple, and historically speaking, right, purple was reserved for a character that was able to kind of balance between, good, purple, blue and yellow, blue and red make purple. And that's why we equate that to being somebody that can tap into both sides, right? So the most obvious being like somebody like Mace Windu. But we don't know anything yet as far as her purple lightsaber, or if that's really a unique weapon. It is unique in the fact that we haven't seen many of that color. But what was unique was the fact that she was able to turn this into a whip, a force whip. And I think you mentioned it earlier, but it's probably worth repeating. This was a weapon that was used by the Night Sisters. So there's a precedence of dark side or at least Force users using a weapon like this. I think it's associated with the dark side and it's certainly associated with Night Sisters. And so it was kind of taboo for Jedi to even use this weapon. Like, and this, it's all fed into the fact that she was keeping this a secret, right? She built this. She was inspired. She had a vision one night that came to her that said she needed to do this. For what purpose, she wasn't sure. But in a vision, she was told she needed to go modify her lightsaber so that she could turn it into a Force whip, even though, again, that was a kind of a forbidden weapon, something that Jedi shouldn't be using whatsoever. And then she took it upon herself to hide the idea. So she can turn this thing on and use it as a lightsaber, right? But with a flick of a switch kind of thing, it turns into this whole whip. So there are a couple things there. One, why would the Force give her this vision? And the quick answer we get, maybe a little bit, which I feel like is just too on the surface, was at one point they're, what was it? They were whacking at weeds,
right?
And having a stiff lightsaber really just wasn't doing the work. But with a whip, she got more motion in there, and she could clear more of the brush and all that quicker with a light whip. I would like to think that if the Force came to me and said, "Hey, you need to do something that's this taboo. I'm going to show you a secret that you shouldn't know," and then she's compelled to do it and goes and does it. It's more than, cleaning out foliage, right? It feels like this is going to have some kind of other effect later down the road.
Yeah, it's a fascinating weapon because and Avon Staros is just absolutely mesmerized. And you're right. So when you talk about the relationship between Vernestra and Emery, this weapon really, like, she was very nervous to show it in him, but they were running low on time. They needed to make better progress. They were just going too slow. And she did. And Emery really is taken aback. And he's like, and all the things you just said, he started, all these things that he was worried about and like why he could do. And he had very mixed feelings. And all of a sudden there was this gap of trust as well.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a very unique weapon though. And it's, when they described it, I got to be honest with you, I envisioned the Family Guy Star Wars special. So anybody that's seen it, you kind of understand what I'm talking about. I won't describe it. It's a PG-13 show.
Right.
But still, it's a really interesting weapon. And I'm with you. There's got to be a purpose that this is going to serve at some point, besides just doing figure eights with it, like a jump rope or something to clear out underbrush. And so I really hope they do something really interesting and unique and cool with this. And I just have no idea what that is. I could see some practical applications with the Drangir in particular, but is it something else? I just don't know. But it's interesting you can even do this. I hope they explain some idea or how maybe Avon Staros, now that she's got a little toy to tinker with, if she can replicate something like this.
Yes. Yeah, we'll get into her thievery waves here in just a minute. And then I guess two other things. There was a moment in here. First off, on the whip, it played a role later on. I think at first she was going at Emery to kind of subdue him with her lightsaber, as it were. And then she switched it into whip mode. And that ultimately kind of turned the tide. And not only that, but she was able to cut his lightsaber in half, his hilt in half, which, put his weapon out of commission at that point. But yeah, you get the sense that it was chalked up to the fact that she had this whip. So it does have some other tactical advantages that a standard lightsaber wouldn't have. So to your point, I think we'll see some of that a little bit later. And then let's see, as far as the other, I guess, Jedi powers that were on display, there was the wayfinding. You mentioned that with Emery, and they specifically call it wayfinding, which is just being able to kind of navigate in space without any kind of, coordinations or anything else. You're feeling your way through space. And I mean, there was not a really direct reference to the Wayfinder from The Rise of Skywalker or that whole aspect of the movie. But I kind of got the sense that they were kind of tied together in some way. Maybe one leads to the other later down the road. I don't know. But I'm trying to think if there were many Jedi that could do this, that could do it. I mean, Luke was known to do it. When especially like that scene during Empire Strikes Back, he's like, no, we're not going. We're not meeting with the others. We're going to another system, the Dagobah, when he's talking to R2.
Right. And
he's like, I want to fly myself. I'm paraphrasing. But that to me was always in my head was always kind of a use of that wayfinding ability, being able to navigate space without the use of coordinates and
I hadn't thought of that.
gear. But Okay, so that was one, and then the last one was the Vern makes a mention that there are some Jedi who are able to see in the past, and I kind of was like, well, maybe that's just the typical visions, right? Being able to see things that came before, things that are happening in the present, and things going by. But it would be kind of cool if there were Jedi that we're going to meet at some point who specialize in just being able to look into the past. Somebody like, who's our boy with the paint on his face? The Jedi that could feel an object.
Quinlan Voss.
Yeah, Quinlan Voss, right? Some along those lines, but maybe not with the tactile piece of it. Just being able to look into the past, right? Instead of foresight, whatever the inverse of that, the reverse of that is.
Well, and I think we had talked about this before. That's a reference to the legends, right? Because I think Jason and Anakin Solo were able to do something like that too. I forgot what it was called, something walking. But yeah, something like that's interesting. Is it just a regular old reference to, being able to, see in the past and see in the future type of thing? But we don't really correlate the past very often, do we? So that is an interesting one to see what exactly that means and what application that might have.
The psychometry, thank you. I never remember that. I say we. I'm lumping you with my stupidity. I never remember that word.
There's enough of us to go around on that one.
So we talked about Jedi feelings enough, probably at this point. Here's one that I thought it wasn't exclusive to this book. We've already seen it in Light of the Jedi. We see it in Into the Dark as well. Mm-hmm. But it's this there is a revived spirituality around the Force and Force users in the High Republic, and it's not coincidental. It is in your face. They're throwing this stuff out there, and everything from the way they approach the Force, the way they think about it. There are a lot stronger parallels, in my opinion, to religion of today, right? And God, and what does it mean? Having this kind of ultimate entity. And I'll give you some examples of it because. So one, we see this all is as the Force wills it, right? This has come up a few times. I think we've seen it probably in canon. I think it was probably Chirrut or somebody who said it. But here it's getting echoed and repeated quite a bit. And it's more than just that. There is a really strong belief that the Jedi really believe that the Force, your destiny is already they talk in ways of that your destiny has already been predefined, right? If the Force is going to want something to happen, you cannot fight it. You can't go against grain. You can't change it. It's just the way it's going to be. That's the acceptance of it. And there's components of modern day religion and really just religion in general, where there's viewpoints that are very similar to that, right? You are here because God put you here. Everything that happens is as part of God's ultimate plan for you that you're not aware of, right? And so those seem like very definitive things, like that you have no control over your destiny and you can't change anything, and it's all been predetermined, and you're just kind of following a path. There are religions that kind of fall in line with that dogma, right? Or at least believe that. Right. And we get aspects of it here, but only from the Force. And so that this cosmic force is at a level that if it were true, then it's at a level that we're not seeing in the prequel trilogy and original trilogy and sequel trilogy and all that. But so that was one of them. I think there's so going back to the other part of this and to tie it back to religion, these kids are going through these existential questions of why do bad things happen to good people, right? And you think about, again, modern day religion. That's one of these questions that as a youth or even as an adult you throw out there sometimes, why did that person have to die? Right? They lived a wonderful life, a life of charity, a life of love and forgiveness, and suddenly they were just whipped away from the earth for no reason whatsoever. And how is that fair? Why do bad people still exist, and why do bad things still happen? Right? All these questions that we think about that we usually tie to religion in modern day society. These guys are talking about it now. Why did the Force take away my master? Why did the Force take away my dad? Why did the Nile get to live? Why did I get to live? Right? That whole survivor's remorse aspect, there was a little bit of that was being played around with in this book as well. Them feeling man, this sucks. I didn't, I have nothing now. I don't want this. I want, I'd rather just not be around than have to live with the thoughts of, all of that stuff. So, I've been going on a little bit here, but I'm sure you picked up on that. Was there anything that I missed around that? And I guess what are your thoughts on maybe why this is so important, or if it is?
Yeah, I mean, it starts to beg the question of, is this why we start to get dark Jedi. We know they're going to encounter fear and something that's going to shake them to their very core. And we've already started to see loss, and presumably we're going to see a bit more substantial loss here pretty soon, or in the coming waves and things like that. So, is this? I like the way you put it. It's an existential crisis, because if you start to doubt enough, you start to go down the path of, I'm going to take everything into my own hands because it doesn't matter anyway. Right? I will bend the force to my will. I will take the force and do what I can with it. And you get like what Emery had in this book. And so I think that's potentially one of the paths that it's starting to set up, and I do like it's like Avankurs, like the Song of the Force. These things are very, spiritual in nature, and many of them are at peace. We all see it differently and all of these things, but what if you don't see it in such a peaceful way? What if you see it as, jagged rocks and as fire and as death and destruction, because that is how you create life. So it's not necessarily wrong, right? And that was one of the things I think he had in the notes about the planet too, is this kind of cycle thing. But yeah, I think it's just one of these things that we're headed towards the dark side, and I'm wondering if we're headed towards it in a very potentially very big and I want to say groundbreaking, but just a earth-shaking way for light side users. And this whole idea of light and justice and the Republic and stuff really shake them to their foundation, their core, to where we start to see fractures happening. Now, the bottom can't fall out entirely, because
right.
Otherwise we probably would have quote unquote heard it at some point. But it'd be interesting to see just how far they take that, because it just seems to be serving it up on a platter.
There's I've only got 3 other things, and they're very quick. So one was the ecosystem, which you just talked about, of Wevo, this moon. There were some parallels to Mortis, right? Because everything dies at night. This acid rain comes in, wipes out everything, and then everything comes back to grows again the next day. And that's very similar to Mortis. Everything died at night and came back when the sun came up and was revived. And that, there's parallels there to the lesson that Luke teaches Rey and Octu about life and death, and the balance and all that stuff. So there was certain aspects of that which I thought were kind of interesting that she threw those in there. But I do want to talk about Avon stealing Emery's lightsaber. Right, she had her eye on this thing the entire time. She was asking a lot of questions about it. How does it work? I think at one point he took it apart and was kind of showing her the components. But she was very fixated on this, and I don't think there's anything nefarious. All right, you don't get that sense from her. She's just has an inquisitive mind. But I want to say, I have a quote here, and I can't remember honestly now if this was Justina Ireland that talked about it, or if it was said in the book. And I won't read it because I can't find it. But the quote was something along the lines that she had an eye for the Kyber crystal, and is that going to get her in trouble a little bit later? Right. It could mean just the fact that she stole it, and now she's going to get caught at some point. That's going to be revealed that she took the lightsaber. But I have my own kind of tinfoil hat theories that she's going to do something with this lightsaber, and she's going to reverse engineer it or tap into the Force. She talks about it as this is a item that is like unlimited power supply, right? So what does that mean?
That still needs a battery, apparently.
Yeah, it still needs a battery, but yeah, you're getting too technical now. Yeah. But yeah,
they actually said that in the book, folks.
Yeah, no,
there's a battery. He pointed it out.
There is. But yeah, so it feels like she's going to do something with this now that she has it. She purposely borrowed it, took it right out of Vern's bag, and it was broken. So, I'm not saying she's going to go repair it like Rey or anything, but she's going to do something with it. To what, we don't know yet, but I think that's going to go horribly wrong for her in some way, right? Whether she unleashes something or discovers something that'll come back to bite us a little bit. Maybe it's just right in front of us and we're not even seeing it right now, but I think there's going to be something from that.
And you can definitely see what the Nile would love to have with a kid like her, right? So someone that's just brilliant and exceptionally curious, wants to challenge authority. Now she's got something of immense power, and she's going to find something creative to do with it. And what that means, she's not going to go and start working on Jedi starfighters or vectors or anything like that, right? So what is this thing going to be that? And my guess is that the Nile are going to somehow find out about her, stumble over her, and whether they'll have an ally or not, it's one thing or another, but should be forced to do something that she would prefer not to, that really makes some trouble maybe we'll get our first super weapon. I don't know. Yeah.
Well, the flip side of that is maybe there's something that Marchion Ro does, right? That puts them at an advantage and puts the Jedi at a disadvantage.
Exactly.
But because she got her hands on this, she's able to counter that, or comes up with some ingenious way to counter what he's got. So even though she's not a Jedi, she's empowering them to fight against Marcia Ambrose. So that would be the inverse of her doing something that's going to backfire on her, but just, having good intentions and pulling off something good. Who knows? Right. Something's going to happen from them. And then the last thing, and that's this character, is it Cara Zune?
Yeah. Like that.
Yeah. I mean, so she's got a presence at the very end of the book. There's a moment there at the very end where they're kind of plotting, I guess, what's going to be next for her. And I got the sense that she was like what was the lead? Is it a storm? I'm trying to think of the hierarchy now.
Yeah, Cloud, then Storm, and then, Strikes. Oh, Cloud and then Strikes, sorry. And then, whatever.
Yes, Cara Zune. She said Cara had to do something, and she stroked one of her tentacles as she walked. She needed to increase her numbers and fast, anything to make her Storm, there you go, look less vulnerable. They tried recruiting from the normal way through scouting cantinas and straightforward fear, but it was slow going, and Cara needed a way to increase her fighting force faster. There are a couple of Jedi kids here. So like you said, it sounds like the way this ended is she's going to try to enlist them, take them over, take advantage of the fact that they're young.
On Downen, I believe.
Yes.
Yeah.
On Downen, right. Yep. That's where there's, she's talking about the schools there on Down. Right. There's a guy named Pier or something like that. And then it says there was a burst of static before the answer came across the comlink. Maybe 100 or so. Why? 100 or so kids. Then it says Cara sat back in her chair. If she could grin like a human, she would, but instead she left her tentacles dance. We have some recruiting to do. So, and that it kind of leads. So I don't know if this is what we see gets picked up in the next novel or not, but it does sound like she is going to be a character at the forefront now that, we've lost some of the Nile already. But yeah, it was just kind of weird that she was in there, like literally in the epilogue, and they kind of name drop her. They kind of set her plan in place. She's kind of monologuing there a little bit. But yeah, my guess is we're going to see her pop up and be kind of the antagonist for these guys.
Right. I believe you were telling me that some of these characters actually showed up in Light of the Jedi, or Light of the Jedi, right?
Yeah.
Clineth or whoever. And so it's like, how do they escape? And how does she, it's a little, this kind of felt a little disjointed, but again, we don't know how much time exactly is between some of these things. It doesn't seem like there's a lot of time in between them all, but so we'll have to see if she survived, Kazav's extinction or not.
Right. Yeah, I think that's all I had. I think we touched on everything else. Any final thoughts on the novel?
Yeah, I'm curious, like you were saying here at the end, I mean, if they go to Dawn, then I'm assuming we're going to see more honesty. And I got to be honest, honesty was probably the least interesting of the characters that we had. Just, he seemed a bit one-dimensional for a lot of it, and couldn't seem to get out of his own rut, and just never really did. So I'm not super interested in that much, but I think overall this book did pretty well. I thought it was all right. It was, a gentle kind of story, gentle arc, not a lot of complexity to it. I thought it was well written, though. I thought we got information about these characters, and I started to, we spent an hour and a half on this. So clearly there's some interest in what these kids are doing and what their futures look like, and what that might mean for Star Wars. It might mean for a new generation of Star Wars fans as well. And I'm really curious to see, or to maybe hear if anybody's read this book, or any of the kids have read the book. I'm really more interested in kind of the kids and the younger, adults. The adults. I love you adults. We're adultish most of the time, but I need a younger person to tell me what they thought of this book. And I just haven't found anybody to read this yet. So I'm going to go try to recruit folks, I guess, to see if they can do it, because it is short. I do recommend folks go out and pick it up. I think it is a very solid story. So don't let the age range scare you off on some of the stuff, because, man, you listen to the show for an hour and a half, you could have read almost all the book. So.
Right, yeah. I'm going to say, you probably don't need to listen to the book now or read the book, because we've already kind of given you all the highlights.
Don't say that. Go buy the book.
No, I'm sorry. Yes, go buy it.
Well, we don't get any kickbacks from that either, so do whatever you want.
Yeah. We're not going to tell you how to live your life. All right. Well, we're going to get out of here. We've got we'll be back here. I think we got a break for a week, but we'll try to fill it with something here. I don't know what. Yeah. I may just go rant on and rave about nothing here to kind of fill the time. But we'll be back in 2 weeks.
Just be like every Sunday.
Yeah, exactly. Just Jonesy won't be here. That's all. No. So we'll be back like in 2 weeks, and we're going to hit the final book in phase 1, which is Into the Dark. So looking forward to getting to that and talking Drengir, because those are kind of interesting character race. Okay, I guess that's it. We'll see you guys in 2 weeks. Thanks everybody who joined us on the live show. Do you want to plug the stuff?
Yeah. I mean, Dale, Bo, Twan, Steph, all the folks that were out there, Chris. Appreciate everyone showing up tonight on the live stream. eargluemedia.com/Discord. You can come talk with us on Discord. eargluemedia.com, of course. We do have a Patreon if you feel so inclined to throw a couple nickels our way. I think it's eargluemedia.com/CC Patreon. But anyway, come see us in Discord. We just want the interaction with y'all. We like talking Star Wars, and appreciate all the folks who are having great conversations out there lately.
Cool. All right. With that, we'll see you guys in 2 weeks.
You're still listening? Wow, that's amazing. Well, I'm here to give you the disclaimer. Normally we do a big, long, drawn-out disclaimer thing saying what's what and who's what and all that other stuff, but I think you guys kind of know that Lucasfilm and Disney have no affiliation with us at all, and we have none with them. We talk about Star Wars, which is their property and all that other good, fun stuff, but I think you can tell which is our stuff and which is their stuff. If you can't, well, then send a lawyer to send an email to me, and I'll be glad to chat with them. Other than that, you know what's what, so that's your disclaimer.